Well, you're right to say at the beginning of the year we'd finally seen some signs of encouragement for the economy, but we'll see more evidence of that in February's data. Industrial production will be okay. Retail sales are already quite lively, but it doesn't matter because from March onwards, economic activity is going to be decimated by the lockdowns, which we've seen, various countries introduced to varying degrees, and now we're seeing in some cases those lockdowns beginning to be unwound, probably suggesting we'll see some differences actually in economic performance across European countries from early May onwards. But we don't get that data quickly enough to know exactly where we are. Where we think we are is that we're seeing unprecedented declines in some areas of consumer expenditure because of the restrictions and being able to spend, let alone willing to spend. And that's what makes this downturn different from what we've seen in the past, particularly the global financial crisis, which was a global trade manufacturing-driven slump. This one has that element to it. We're seeing huge supply chain disruptions and also weakness in demand. But at the same time, we're seeing the shutdowns impact on the area of the economy that accounts for the biggest share of expenditure, consumer spending. So we're looking at huge declines. The numbers you mentioned earlier from the IMF, they seem reasonable to us. Probably, if anything, the risk in some countries in Europe is to the downside, even bigger than the IMF is thinking about where the lockdowns have been extreme to deal with huge increasing cases and, unfortunately, a very high fatality rate. So I think the question about how long this lasts is really to do with how successful policymakers have been in, number one, containing the virus, and the news recently has been a bit more encouraging, but there's a long way to go. And secondly, trying to mitigate the effects of the containment measures on businesses and on employment. And that is the big question at the moment. How bad will the damage be? For how long?
Ken, there is a feeling out there that perhaps some more stimulus is required then. We've got coordination at the European level for some form of a bailout initially, but many feel as though corona bonds might be the answer, some sort of coordination for what comes down the track, all those second round effects. And we've certainly seen the challenge under Mario Draghi's era where he was shadow boxing with the second round effects from the oil price and some deflationary pressures still. What do you make of what's necessary this time to avoid a deflationary environment?
Well, on the deflation risk, I think the problem there is that the underlying trajectory of inflation if we're thinking about the Eurozone, has been low for a long time. And inflation expectations, at least market-derived measures, have also been low for a long time. And that reflects past policy errors, not responding radically enough, quickly enough to adverse shocks, both the global financial crisis and the subsequent Eurozone crisis. So it may be that those disinflationary or deflationary forces are already strongly embedded in the Eurozone, and therefore there isn't a great deal that policymakers can do about them in the short run. If we're talking about dealing with today's problem, the impact on the economy of the lockdown measures because of the concerns about the spread of the virus, then in that case we've seen some steps, welcome steps so far, in terms of the PEPP from the ECB, the Emergency Purchase Programme, and also the recent agreement in Europe to soften the conditionality of precautionary credit lines supplied by the ESM. I think what we really need to see from a corona bond perspective is an acceptance from some countries in the Eurozone that they're willing to mutualize debt obligations. And the likelihood of that happening in the short run is rather low, I think. So although we'll probably continue to see talk about common debt issuance, it's very unlikely to happen until there's a radical change of thinking in the countries which are skeptical about it. So my feeling would be there's a sequencing involved here. Very likely that we'd see the ESM used first and only corona bonds as a last resort if the cost to the countries that are resisting doing this begins to spiral, both in terms of financial instability and output losses, then they'll consider doing it. But they'll be in no hurry to do it because it involves huge change in the way policy sovereignty is organized in the Eurozone. And for a number of countries, there's either a lack of appetite to do it or a lack of willingness to mutualize. And there's a long way to go, I suspect, before we get there.
Hi, I'm Joanna Bersecci, and thank you for watching. You can check out more of our videos by clicking on the boxes on the screen. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more from CNBC International. Thank you for watching.